Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and we have got a ton of NBA basketball to talk about today because we've been doing our top 30 player rankings for the last week and change, so we haven't had a ton of opportunities to react to some of the news going down in the sport right now. And unfortunately, the biggest news of the last 24 hours is that Damian Lillard is out indefinitely with a blood clot. Unfortunately, similar to what happened with Victor Wembanyama, what ended his season, he has a deep vein thrombosis. So, in light of this unfortunate news, Logan, what does this mean for Milwaukee?
I mean, I think it kind of pops their balloon of having any opportunity to go on a meaningful or deep playoff run. The silver lining, if there is anyone, is that because it's this late in the season, like they are locked into the playoffs, they're 40-31, they're going to end up with the 5th or 6th seed. So there's no danger of them, slipping into the play-in or anything like that. They're ultimately going to end up taking on the Pacers or the Knicks, which, without Dame, I think I would confidently pick the other team, but I wouldn't completely count out Milwaukee. It's really disappointing, though, man, just because this was the year where we felt Dame's bounce back, where he felt like, not prime Dame, but the Damian Lillard that we've come to know and love, one of the best shooters in the league, and there's just no real formula here. Like, the Bucks have good players, like Giannis and Brook Lopez and Kyle Kuzma. They're solid, but it's just not a strong enough core to do any real damage. And the thing that I kept circling back when I heard this news, Carson, was just, I don't think the Bucks do this Kyle Kuzma deal in hindsight if they knew that this was looming on the horizon. I think you hold on to Chris Middleton. Obviously, they couldn't have known that in advance. And I've liked what Kuzma's added to this team. I think he adds a dimension of, rebounding, of honestly an infusion and injection of energy that Milwaukee was kind of lacking. I have liked the Kuzma addition, but I feel like if you had held on to Middleton, you would at least have a better opportunity to make a real run, because he's a smart playmaker. He's a good shooter. I'm disappointed, man. I wanted to see a real Giannis and Dame opportunity. Not that I thought that they had any real chance of doing serious damage with the state of the East right now, right? The Celtics are a juggernaut. I think the Cavaliers are a juggernaut. I think it was going to be a real uphill battle for them in either of those matchups. But we're robbed of a Giannis and Dame playoff run, and Dame isn't getting any younger. Giannis isn't getting any younger. It's just, it's really disappointing, and I feel for Milwaukee Bucks fans. There's nothing really positive I can make about this one.
No, it's hard not to be extremely pessimistic about the Bucks, not just for this year, but honestly, for the future. We don't know how long Dame is going to be out. They've given no timeline, but if you just look at the precedent, Wemby was shut down for the year in February. A few years ago, BI was shut down for the year in March. Those are teams who are in different situations because they're not trying to make a playoff push. But Brian Suter, or MD, who is my source on all things sports medicine, because Logan, believe it or not, I'm not a doctor over here. So I defer to the experts, and he says it's normally a minimum 3-month treatment period where players are on blood thinners after they've been diagnosed with a blood clot, and you cannot play while you're on blood thinners. So that would be season ending, and I think that is most likely the reality, that Dame is done for the year. And so you just reflect on the first 2 years of the Dame-Giannis experiment in Milwaukee, and it's so disappointing. You gave up Drew Holiday, you gave up a first rounder, you gave up 2 first-round swaps, you gave up Grayson Allen, and you're left with a team that's gone 89-64 in 2 years. They're tied for the 9th best record in the NBA with the Pacers. And if you think about every change that they've tried to make to upgrade this team, to accommodate Dame and Giannis and put them in a better position to succeed, to take that leap to being a contender, none of it has really worked. They fired Adrian Griffin, went to Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers, 57-50 as head coach of the Bucks. Just not a good head coach. They've done what they can to change up the wing rotation, right? Finding minutes from a guy like AJ Green, putting Andre Jackson in the starting lineup, bringing in a Gary Trent Jr. and a Taurean Prince, and all of those moves in totality have really only improved the Bucks supporting cast marginally.
They've been putting duct tape over the hole, and we're flex sealing the boat. Now we ain't even got a boat.
Yeah, yeah. I guess with Dame, we really don't have a boat, do we? Like, again, I think that they've improved marginally, but it's just not enough when the entire supporting cast around this duo is not nearly as talented as the high-end contenders around the league. They make the trade, moving Chris Middleton to bring in Kyle Kuzma, and I think that Kuzma has been solid, but he's not a needle mover for the Bucks. I still think he's a worse basketball player than Chris Middleton. I get it. He's younger. He's a little bit cheaper. You don't have the availability concerns. And he has addressed some of their needs with his athleticism and his defensive tools, his length, what he brings as a rebounder. But sometimes he offsets that with just how catastrophically bad he can be offensively, with how terrible he's been as a jump shooter this year, with how bad he can be as a decision maker, the shot selection. So I don't think you can consider that a step in the right direction. And just overall, right, Kuz does improve their defense some, but he also hurts their offense compared to having a Middleton. And that's just been kind of the overall trend of this season. Last year, the defense was the problem. This year, they were able to improve the defense, but right as that improvement occurred, the offense regressed to the point where now the offense has been very mediocre this year, and they just never maximized the Dame Giannis fit. They were never able to get the most out of those guys out of pick and roll. They were never able to get the best version of Dame with Giannis on the floor, given Giannis's ball dominance. We were talking about this just the other week, but Dame's production per 75 possessions without Giannis on the floor, he's giving you 31 points on 65% true shooting. He's scoring with way more volume and he's way more efficient because that's the role that he's comfortable in, being the guy, being that ball dominant superstar offensive point guard. But he just hasn't been that guy with Giannis. And now he's probably done for the year. So that's 2 years down the drain. Last year, the Bucks were a 49-win team in the regular season. They weren't great, but then Giannis got hurt, so they were done for the playoffs anyways. And now this year, again, they haven't been a great regular season team, but without Dame, we know they have no chance of making a run. And you have no assets to move. You don't have intriguing young players. You don't have draft capital down the line. After this year, you'll finally be off of Brook Lopez's contract, and I've been saying for a couple years that they should have looked to move off of Brook, go more Giannis at the 5, get more athletic at the 5, but they have waited to move off of Brook, and now they're in this spot where it's like, okay, I presume that they'll be done with him, but Brook, for all of his flaws, like, is still a solid starting center.
Well, and for a team like the Bucks, it begs the question: can you even afford to lose a guy like that? That's so imperative
Exactly.
to your team. You're not in a position to be picky.
No, you're not, and like you have to address that position now, which is easier said than done. So I just look at all of the circumstances here, how many of the stops they've already pulled out, and how unsuccessful they've been in totality. And if I were Giannis, I just wouldn't see the opportunity for improvement. I would just be done. I'd be thinking, I'm 30 years old. Damian Lillard, my co-star here,
Dame's going to be 35.
Almost 35. And we're this far away and we don't have the means to get significantly better. To me, he's given all the time that he needs to Milwaukee. He's brought them a title.
Exactly.
I mean, he's been the best player in their franchise's history since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I think that's what we're headed towards. I do think that we're headed towards a blow up here because I don't see how this situation gets better.
Well, I think you're staring down the barrel of the gun, and you just gotta bite the bullet, man. I don't really think there's an area for recourse. If they had, for example, say they had hit on their first round pick instead of going out and getting A.J. Johnson, and you had gotten a vital, important player to your rotation. If you had,
who by the way they traded away,
yeah,
to
exactly,
get off of Middleton.
Exactly. Or if you had held on to Middleton, or if you would, you can look back in the rearview mirror and you can say, if you had done this, if you had done that, the situation that they're currently in, I think that's the only action that they can take. And it sucks, but Giannis brought you a title, and that's ultimately the goal, man. And I think it just makes more sense to recoup assets for the future, move off of these older guys that aren't going to win you a title, because it's not just the fact that the Bucks aren't getting any better and don't have any routes for improvement. You also look at the state of the East.
Yeah, man.
Cleveland is ascending. Boston is not going anywhere. New York, I think, has avenues to improving. If that's moving a player for another player and doing a swap. Like, they've got assets where they can make a big move. Orlando is improving, right? Like,
I think, honestly, you can just say, look at Boston, look at Cleveland.
Yeah.
You are not within striking distance of either of those teams, and you are all in. All your chips are already in the middle of the table. And so at that point, I would say, all right, let's reboot.
I think you dangle Giannis out there on your fishing rod. I think you do the same with Dame, and you see, the biggest fish, and you go and catch it. And
yeah. And realistically, the Bucks won't initiate this. It's just so hard to move off of a Giannis. And Dame, I don't know what his value is going to be on the open market now with this concern lingering with his age, even though I think he's still a top 20 player. But my hope is that Giannis initiates it, because if Giannis does, then all the dominoes will start to fall, and that would probably be best for both parties. But the problem for the Bucks is they don't have their own draft picks, so they're not going to benefit from being bad a lot.
It's a tough pill to swallow, but Giannis isn't appreciating as an asset. Dame is not appreciating as an asset. These are older guys, and I think you just need to capitalize as soon as you can and try to get as much back as you can. It's the hardest thing in sports, man, parting with your franchise player. It's tough, but I do think that's the best route of action for Milwaukee moving forward, as great as he is. I don't see a road to them contending anytime soon.
Yeah, it's hard, man, because they just put a core around him that was old and that was descending when he should have been in the heart of his prime. And you saw that with Drew, where he's still a really good basketball player, but he couldn't consistently be the high-level offensive player that they needed him to be after the title run in 2021. You see that with Middleton, where as good as the guy was over the last couple postseasons when he was healthy, he just couldn't be available. You do see that with the slow regression of Brook Lopez and just the overall waning athleticism of this entire core. And the Dame trade was just too little too late. It didn't work out as well as I hoped it would in a vacuum, like just that duo, because Dame was coming off such a phenomenal 2023 season. I thought they would be the best duo in basketball, and they never were that. But the reality is that the supporting cast around Giannis was just regressing and continued to regress, and the Bucks waited too long to meaningfully improve that. And they made some nice moves on the margin, but you just look at the high-level two-way role players that you have in Cleveland and in OKC and in Boston, and you compare it to what you're hoping to get out of an Andre Jackson, who I still have major offensive questions about, or feeling that AJ Green is your best two-way role player wing. It's just tough. It's just a tough spot to be in when your goal is to win the title because you have a top three player on the planet.
Think about it. Milwaukee would kill to have a Ty Jerome. Milwaukee would kill to have a Dean Wade in their lineup. These are guys that are the
entire Thunder rotation they would kill to have. If you gave them a Cason Wallace, if you gave them an Aaron Wiggins, if you gave them an Isaiah Joe, give them any of those guys. We're not even talking about Lou Dort. We're not even talking about Caruso. All of those guys would be huge difference makers, and they've just never found that guy.
That's just as important as having the stars in today's NBA.
100%. 100%. That's the story of a lot of the best teams in basketball this year. The big three, it's not just that they have crazy top-end talent. They have phenomenal supporting casts, dude. The Thunder now, I saw this tweeted today, in their last 31 games are a double-digit net team with Shea off the floor. There's just so much talent. Because, that was the one concern early in the year, right? The offense was bad in the non-Shea minutes, and now the offense has been really good for an extended stretch. I want to talk about OKC soon. We're not going to do it on this show, but I have been so impressed by what they've been doing recently. I mean, they're undefeated without J-Dub now since he went down, and they're just addressing all of the little question marks that you had about them in such an impressive way that I just continue to become more and more confident in them. But I just continue to feel worse and worse about the state of the Bucks, man. It's they got the shooting this year and they improved defensively, and still here you are. You're looking at a team that's 40-31, and now their season is over. I think that without Dame, they are a painfully average basketball team. I want to talk about another story that's been developing, Logan, which is Draymond Green just absolutely surging in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. This guy was plus 800 to win the award a week ago. And today on DraftKings, he is the odds-on favorite at minus 130 What do you make of that, Logan? Does Draymond deserve to be the Defensive Player of the Year favorite?
I'm kind of 50-50 with him and Mobley, but I honestly don't have like a horse in the race, man. I wouldn't be disappointed with whoever they gave it to, right? Because this was going to be Wemby's award before he got injured.
Yeah.
Some of the advanced numbers on both of these guys are ridiculous. So Mobley has defended the 14th most shots per game of any NBA player this season. And out of that top 14, he's got the third best defensive field goal percentage of anybody, just behind Walker, Kessler, and Wemby. You look at Draymond, he's defended the 38th most shots per game of any NBA player. Of those 38 players, he's got the third best defensive field goal percentage, actually higher than Mobley's. He's just behind Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. That's on every shot. Do you know how ridiculous that is, dude? For a small guy like Draymond, like with Chet and Wemby, it makes sense, right? These freaks of nature, these super tall, lanky dudes, they take up all kind of space. And a guy like Draymond Green, who stands 6'5", 6'6", is up there with those guys. It's ridiculous. Speaking of which, you look at their defensive field goal percentage inside 6 feet. Dre's number is better than Mobley's. He's holding players 9.1% below their average. That's the 12th best mark. Mobley is one spot behind him with the 13th best mark, 8.6%. And the defensive rating on-off numbers with both of them is very close. Mobley improves his team by 2.6 points. Dre improves the Dubs by 2.3. I don't know, man. I just feel spoiled. I feel like they're the two best defenders on the planet. I'm indifferent at this point. You know, I thought Mobley was going to be the runaway candidate, but I feel like the argument against Mobley would be that he does have a Jared Allen, right? That he has another guy that can at least supplement that. And even though the Cavs defense is great without him, you know, I guess Dre has Jimmy now, which I guess comes into play a little bit too, but I don't know, man. I just can't figure out how Dre keeps doing this, man. Like we always talk about like LeBron's longevity and how he ages like fine wine, and I don't get how Dre keeps getting better defensively with time, man. It doesn't make sense. Like, he's one of the smartest defenders ever, but you'd figure at some point like he'd have some sort of crazy athletic regression or something, and he doesn't. Dre is still one of the best defenders alive. I know you continually say he's one of the 5 best alive. I wholeheartedly believe that. And
yeah,
not to have a cop-out answer, but like I'm indifferent. If Mobley wins it, I'm going to be happy. If Dre wins it, I'm going to be happy. I guess sentimentally, I kind of am rooting for Dre a little bit just because he's the old guy. But it's ridiculous that he's still doing this at such an old age, man.
It's incredible. He's one of the handful of greatest defensive players ever, and he certainly belongs in the conversation. You mentioned how effective he's been as a rim protector. He's been a 94th percentile isolation defender. Just such a rare combination historically of the ability to defend the perimeter at such a high level and then also to be such a destructive backline defender. And although his opponent field goal percentage differential at the rim is still elite, he's a very good rim protector. It obviously doesn't look the same as a Mobley or these other conventional bigs who are defending a lot more shots at the rim, but when Dre does defend shots at the rim, he's very effective at doing so, and he's just flying around. I mean, every rotation, he is all over. His anticipation, his positioning, his defensive IQ really is unrivaled. He's the smartest defender alive, and he's up there for the smartest defender of all time. There is one thing that you said that I would push back on a bit, which is that a point in Dre's favor is Evan Mobley has Jared Allen, and I think that you got towards it at the end, but I think Jimmy Butler does deserve a lot of credit for what's happened with the Warriors defensively, because before Jimmy joined the team, they were a good, not great defense. When Dre was on the floor, they were a good, not great defense. It's since Jimmy joined that now they're second in defensive rating in that stretch. They're an elite defense when Jimmy and Dre share the floor. They're an elite defense when Jimmy is on the floor alone. Better, actually, than they are when Dre is on the floor alone, although it is a small sample size of Jimmy being on the floor without Dre for the Warriors. But I do think that that's important to point out because Mobley is actually the guy who end-to-end this year has been anchoring elite team defense when he's on the floor and consistently has had the Cavs rank as a better defense when he is on the floor without Jared Allen. Like, remarkably, their 2-point defense is significantly better, which has been the case for years. Mobley is the better pure rim protector. Even their defensive rebound percentage has been higher in Mobley only lineups than in Jared Allen only lineups. So I do think that that's important to point out how dominant Mobley has been at both the 4 and the 5. His versatility is also remarkable. He is the much more impactful defensive rebounder, which allows him to anchor those units at the 5 so effectively. He is still the more impactful rim protector. You mentioned that their opponent field goal percentage at the rim is basically the same, but Mobley is defending far more attempts. So I do think that he has the greater impact as an interior defender for sure. And the guy has elite switchability. We talk about it all the time, but outside of Bam Adebayo, he's the most switchable big in basketball. He's a hell of an isolation defender. He defends most wings just about as well as anybody in basketball. I was watching him guard Kevin Durant the other day, and KD barbecued the Cavs in totality because he's been doing that to everybody because the man is playing out of his mind. But when he tried to isolate Mobley, he was 1 of 5. He got blocked on a pull-up jumper. He had a turnover, and every shot that he was able to get off was a highly contested pull-up jumper. And there's not a lot of people who really can contest a KD jumper all that effectively because his release point is so high. Mobley is one of those guys who can move with him, who has those fluid hips, but then who also has the size and length to like smother some of those shots. So it's incredible. I mean, when players try to isolate Mobley, they shoot 39% on twos. They have a true shooting percentage of 48. And I do want to hammer that home because I saw somebody bring up in this conversation like that Draymond's versatility clearly has him above Mobley. And they talked about Mobley like he was some like conventional big who was getting
like
blown by. And it's like
he's like
no,
80
dude.
or something. Like, that's ridiculous.
Like, he's one of the most special bigs ever in terms of his ability to guard the perimeter.
I don't know how you could watch a playoff series last year and come away
Exactly.
with that.
I mean, I talk about it all the time, but he held Paolo to 30-something% shooting when he was the primary defender. He held Tatum to 30-something% shooting. I mean, he has a special ability to move his feet out in space. So that is part of what makes him so great defensively. And you mentioned the defensive on-off swing. I think it's actually larger than that, according to Cleaning the Glass, at least, which filters out garbage time.
That was from Data Baller, I think. But yeah, you're right.
So yeah, if you filter out garbage time, the Cavs have a 5.5-point defensive on-off swing with Mobley on compared to off it. For Dre, that number is just 2.5. So the Cavs defense is better with Mobley on the floor than the Warriors is with Dre on the floor. And the Cavs defense with Mobley off the floor is worse than the Warriors defense with Dre off the floor. And there's always a little bit of noise in defensive on-off numbers, right? That's not the be-all, end-all. But I do think what Mobley has done end-to-end anchoring elite defense this year gives him the slight edge, in my opinion. I do think that it's super close. And like you said, man, I mean, when it comes to just acknowledging Dre's career defensively, you rooting for him for that reason, I thought that he should have won Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. I campaigned for him over Jaren Jackson Jr. this year, which was not a common take, but I thought he had the best defensive season. He would have won in 2022 if he hadn't gotten hurt because he was anchoring a dominant Warriors defense that year. Like, Draymond should have multiple Defensive Player of the Year awards, in my opinion, and the one DPOY doesn't reflect how great and how long his defensive peak has been. But what annoys me about this is how quickly this entire conversation just changed on a dime. Basically, when Draymond said on his podcast, like, hey, I think I should be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. And it wasn't just that, because he had some great defensive performances that aligned with that. Obviously, did a remarkable job on Giannis, had a great game against Milwaukee, had 8 stocks against Denver. Like, he was stacking up some great defensive performances. But realistically, I think that the impetus of Draymond going from having long odds to win the award to becoming the odds-on favorite was just basically him using his platform. Shout out to that platform. Shout out to the volume to say, like, I think I deserve it. And that just kind of frustrated me, and it kind of shows how arbitrary this stuff can be and how impactful narratives are and how much one big voice saying one thing can change the discourse. So I don't like that aspect of it. I do think he is the second best candidate. He is defending out of his mind right now. but I've been saying it should be Mobley since Wemby got hurt, and I still would lean on Evan Mobley here.
I think I'm aligned. The one thing I will add though is we have been talking about Steph and how Jimmy's helped Steph so much come along, just alleviating some of that pressure. And I do think that's a similar case with Dre defensively. Like, one, just Jimmy being on the floor, but also like the psychological aspect that we always talk about, it just breathing life into these guys. Like, I think it gave Dre and Steph, these veteran guys who understand the moment, understand the gravity, understand this is a big deal. And I think Jimmy's breathed life into this team that they haven't had in honestly since the title run, man. Like, the Warriors aren't dead yet. They're not dead just yet, and I think Dre and Steph have got a lot left in the tank. But I think Jimmy's kicked them into gear, and that did shock me, though, man. Just the odd swings. That's the craziest thing about all this. Going from, and even before that, dude, Dre was like, over like plus 1,000. Like you said, a week ago it was like plus 800. Before that, like the odds were ridiculous. I don't know, and I also just don't want Mobley to get like underappreciated in all of this because Mobley, it's not like this is some new deal. Like Mobley's the new kid on the block. This is the first year that he's broke out. Mobley's been doing this defensively, and
dude, he was third for DPOY his second year in the league.
Yeah, like I think you make the key part of the argument is that end to end, it's not a 2-month stretch where Dre's been dominating. Mobley's been doing this all year, and if I was starting a defense right now, I don't know if this should be the tiebreaker. I would take Mobley.
Yeah, and it's super close, by the way. I don't mean to make it sound like Dre hasn't been an extremely impactful defender end-to-end this year, but the Warriors' team defense has totally kicked it up a notch since Jimmy joined the team. They have been up a level, whereas if you look at the minutes that Mobley's been on the floor without Jared Allen all year, like, their defensive rating has been super impressive, and it hasn't been quite as impressive for Dre when he is on the floor without Jimmy. They have a defensive rating north of 112 in those minutes. I'm as big a Draymond guy as there is. I think that, again, he's one of the handful of greatest defensive players ever, and you cannot have the Warriors dynasty without Draymond defensively, just like obviously you can't have it without Steph offensively. But my favorite stat to recite is that the Warriors have had more top 5 defenses in their run of dominance than they have top 5 offenses. That is the work of Draymond Green, and I would love to see him get another one. I just don't really like how this whole discourse has come about. And of course, I don't like that it's coming at the expense of my beloved Evan Mobley. I love both these guys. These are two of my top 10 favorite NBA players, but it does feel like some people are like, here's the vet who we all know who's been doing this for a long time. Let's give him some love. And they're, I think, underrating Evan Mobley's defensive greatness because everybody just underrates Evan Mobley, which is all good. It's all good. I don't care. It's top 15. Deal with it. And it's only up from here.
Let's give Marcus Smart a DPOY, man.
I do think there are a couple guys who are at least worth a shout here. Like Dyson Daniels obviously is having a phenomenal guard season. Like by far leads the league in deflections, steals, drives, stopped. He's been the best defensive guard in basketball. It's just always really hard for me to argue a guard over a super impactful big or an elite backline defender like you get with Mobley and Draymond. And I think you see that with the kind of wonky fact that the Hawks defense has been slightly better with Dyson Daniels off the floor. Obviously, Dyson Daniels is a phenomenal defensive player. That just tells you, though, that you can't quite have the same monstrous impact defensively as a guard as you can as one of these guys who is a more impactful overall team and help defender. And then Jaren Jackson Jr., I do think belongs firmly in this conversation, but I just think Mobley's the better defender. I think they have a lot of the same strengths. I would say that Triple J is the better pure rim protector, but Mobley is a significantly better defensive rebounder. He's a significantly better drop defender. He's a better post defender. He's more disciplined. Triple J still fouls too much. So all those things in totality, they're both very switchable, but I would even give Mobley a slight edge there. I would take Mobley over the field at this point. But while we're talking about awards, Logan, I want to take a quick look at the first team All-NBA, because it feels like there are 4 guys who very clearly should be locks for that first team this year. That being SGA, Jokic, Giannis, and Jason Tatum. Presuming that you agree with those 4 being locks, Logan, who would get your 5th first-team All-NBA spot right now?
The first guy I wrote down is Evan Mobley.
Whoa!
Yeah,
you sandbagging son of a bitch. You just know how to put a smile on my face, don't you? You crazy son of a bitch. Evan Mobley, first-team All-NBA? I'll be.
I'm buttering Carson's biscuit right now, man.
I mean, this is what I'm saying, dude. Every time I've got to take, you take it a little bit further. Well, personally, I think that's kind of crazy, but I fucking love it.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to think about who deserves it the most, and I think you got to have a few components for me. One, I think it needs to be a good year by your own standards. So, like, Luka Doncic, like, raw statistically, like, he's just not
he won't even meet the 65-game minimum, and
true.
He wouldn't make it anyways.
But he wasn't good enough by his standards to me. LeBron, I didn't think has been good enough end-to-end this year to be first team. The same thing I thought with Steph Curry. And I think you got to have the team success. And so the first two guys that came to mind were a Cav, if it's Evan Mobley or if it's Donovan Mitchell. Personally, I'm indifferent to who they choose, but I think Evan Mobley's the best Cav, so I would give it to him. Like, I think it would be statistically underwhelming to some people when you just look at the box score. It's like, oh, we got a guy with 18 points and 7 rebounds. This is I don't know, man. People would probably call it a fucking DeAndre Jordan All-NBA first team, and it's like that's totally disingenuous to the player that Evan Mobley is. But
I'd kill myself if anybody said that to my face.
Dude, I saw somebody the other day call...
I don't want to hear it. Does it have to do with Evan Mobley, and is it negative? Because I don't want to hear it.
No, it has something to do with DeAndre Jordan. I saw somebody commented DeAndre Jordan is the Nikola Jokic of Dikembe Mutombos, and I wanted to blow my head off. I wanted to put one to the dome.
He's more like the Mason Plumlee of Dikembe Mutombos.
That's what I think. That was way more closely aligned.
Or we could just not compare him to Dikembe Mutombo.
It's a great idea.
Honestly, he's more like the Nikola Jokic of Daniel Gafford's, maybe. But is he even a better rim protector than Daniel Gafford?
That's a good
I don't know.
comp.
I'm just thinking about the vertical spacing, the rim protection.
Yeah.
DeAndre Jordan had a very simple
He's
job.
He's Nikola Jokic of Clint Capella's, man, you know?
Yeah, basically.
Like, so that made me mad. But to me, it wouldn't be like that. Even though statistically, you may be underwhelmed, I think in totality, like his impact, that's what I'm really looking at, is the most important thing to me. And so I only wrote down 3 names that I really seriously considered that had all of those components. That was Mobley or Mitchell. And then the next guy I get to would be Jalen Brunson, just because I think that, team success, great offensive player, great player in general, done it end-to-end this year, really impactful, best player on his team. KD, team success component. Anthony Edwards, team success component. Like, there's just certain boxes that need to be checked for me that aren't being checked by those guys, and I want to reward the last spot to a guy whose team has had a lot of success, and so I ended up settling on a Nick or a Cav, and so those are my 3 picks. You think I got too much Evan Mobley in my pipe, man?
I mean, it's bold, Logan. It's really bold. I understand that you want to reward a Cav because they are having one of the great regular seasons that we've ever seen. But I would say the reason that they're having one of those great regular seasons is above all else because they could easily have 3 guys who make an All-NBA team. And then you have Jared Allen. And then you have the totality of the supporting cast. And you have a guy who very well could be the coach of the year. Like, team success can be such a collective effort. And it's not something that I value all that much when we're talking about All-NBA. Now, of course, I value highly your impact on your team's success, but if you're a great player in a shitty situation, your team's not going to win as many games as a guy like Evan Mobley, who's playing with another top 15 guy in Donovan Mitchell, who's playing with another top 25 guy in Darius Garland, et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that you can make first-team All-NBA while being on a team that is very mediocre. Luka made it just 2 years ago when the Mavs were the 11 seed. Victor Wembanyama, if he had stayed healthy this year, I think most people did consider a lock. And the Spurs were 21-25 when he played. So I'm just giving it to the guy who I think is having the 5th best season, and that's Kevin Durant. I think Kevin Durant is having a phenomenal season that is going criminally underrated. And I just talked about this some because I had him number 7 in my player rankings, which was 4 spots higher than you had him. But the guy is giving you 27 points, 6 boards, 4.5 assists a game on 64% true shooting. He still has the best combination of on and off ball scoring in the league. This guy has an effective field goal percentage of 66 on catch and shoot jumpers, and He is number 1 in pull-up jumper efficiency among the top 25 guys in attempts. So he's had as good a jump shooting season as anybody in basketball. He's a 90th percentile efficiency spot-up guy, and he's a 93rd percentile isolation guy. He shoots over 54% for mid-range, which, by the way, Logan, he's done over the last 5 seasons, ever since he came back from his Achilles tear. He's been a 54% mid-range shooter, which is just unfathomable, and he's almost 43% from deep. And in that same 5-year span, he's better than 40% from deep. Like what KD has been doing over this last half decade, after he tore his Achilles and came back at 32 years old, it's some of the greatest scoring longevity we've ever seen. I tweeted this out yesterday too, but there are only 2 guys with more than 12 seasons scoring 25 or more points per game in NBA history. KD has 16. LeBron has 20. Nobody else is over 12. So if it weren't for LeBron, I mean, KD would be standing head and shoulders above everybody else in NBA history in terms of that elite scoring production year after year for well over a decade. He just happens to be overshadowed by the greatest longevity we've ever seen. But I don't want that to make what KD's doing feel normal. I don't want it to make us underappreciate what he's doing, because it is utterly remarkable, this scoring volume and efficiency. And he's still a legitimate plus defender. He holds opposing players 7% below their average at the rim, is still actively a good secondary rim protector. And when we talk about the team success component, when Kevin Durant plays,
this is a good argument.
The Suns are 33-26. They're a legitimately good basketball team. When he plays with Devin Booker, they're 32-21. That is a 50-win pace. That is a legitimate playoff lock. The problem is they're 2-11 without KD, and they're 3-16 when either KD or Book misses a game. So that's why I just don't value like the seeding point, because when KD is on the floor, this is a legitimately good basketball team, and he's doing that in spite of the fact that the supporting cast sucks. And there's one dude, Logan, who I think is so culpable for so much of it. And I just
Brad Beal
went down a rabbit hole of Bradley Beal-induced depression, man, because I started digging into some of the numbers over the last 3 years.
Bradley Beal cares anymore.
No. And he's a terrible fit here, and he is such a negative defensively. And it's just remarkable how much better they've been without him. Since KD joined the Suns, when Book and KD play together without Bradley Beal, the Suns are 32-11. That includes 13-3 this year, by the way. When KD and Book share the floor together, the Suns are a plus 9.6 net team. They're an excellent basketball team. This year, when KD is out there without Book or Beal, actually, the Suns are a plus 10 net team. That's what he's doing as his lone superhero arc. And in the minutes without Devin Booker, he's giving you like 31 points per 75 possessions on insane efficiency. But when KD and Book are out there together, just this year without Beal, the Suns are still a plus 9 net team. And then when you put all 3 of them together, they're a negative 3 net team. Beal has been that catastrophic. He has been more of a negative for them than role players who will just do their job, who will just try to fit in, who will compete defensively, who are bigger, better athletes. Beal has a negative 12 on-off swing this year. Like, he really has ruined this team. And they were already trending downwards, right? With Chris Paul's regression, with DeAndre Ayton's regression, I don't think there was a way for them to reopen a title window after 2023. But Bradley Beal has made things as bad as they possibly could be, and obviously he has trapped them. So it's hard to even talk about KD's greatness this season without still getting into a whole Suns doomsday thing, because that's what makes this all so depressing. KD is still that great, and yet he can't salvage this team because when he's not on the floor, they're incapable of winning any basketball games. And even when he is on the floor, they can be a really good team, but they can't be a great team because the limitations of those around him are so glaring. But he's still absolutely dominant. I think he's having a sensational season. And LeBron would probably be the next guy who comes to mind for me here. But I just think LeBron was not very good for the first 25 games of this season. He was a 22-point-per-game guy on average efficiency. He wasn't competing defensively. He was a negative on-off guy. KD has been more consistent, so I would give him the nod.
I'm moved.
You got KD on your first team? I moved you all the way?
I might. I mean, I'm moved by that argument.
Thanks,
the
man.
Suns have a win percentage of 56% with KD and 15% without him. It's
a pretty big difference, man.
Wow. You know? Well, I don't know. I'm just thinking about like this thought exercise. Like, I don't know what we were talking about earlier about the overall depth of teams and stuff like that. And I just did like a thought exercise in my head where I was like, all right, man, well, if I swap KD and Jalen Brunson, the Knicks are kicking everybody's ass. Not that Brunson's great, but
he's Kevin Durant. You know who he is.
I do.
He's Kevin Durant.
I think I'm going to have to pull a Nick Collison here, man. Hand up. I think that one's on me, dude. I moved.
Good, man.
That was an excellent argument, man. I think I've been moved. I think I will put KD in that last spot.
I really would like to see him get the nod. Personally, I don't think he will. I think it's going to go to LeBron.
I mean, those numbers are crazy.
I know.
They're ridiculous.
Dude. And he's Kevin Durant. He's doing the Kevin Durant stuff he's been doing for the last 5 years. His team around him is just an abomination.
Ironically, though, even though he's been balling like this, I wonder if his value is lower just because of the stank on the Suns. Like, I wonder if a team would be able to get him at, not like a super bargain. I still think you're going to give up a boatload to go and get Kevin Durant because he's still KD. But, I don't know. I wonder if his price will be a little bit lower this offseason. But I'm praying to the basketball gods that they trade one of or both KD and Book this offseason, man. I just want them to get out of this hellscape.
Me too, man.
Fuck Brad Beal.
I mean, just the entire Phoenix Suns organization has done such a disservice to them.
We should banish them.
Maybe we should banish them, man. But
let's
KD
relegate them to the G League after they trade them. We'll move up, I don't know, like the Fort Wayne Mad Ants or something.
I fear that their fate is even worse than going to the G League, man, because they're just going to be really bad and they're not going to have any of their own picks unless they can work out a trade with the Rockets, which to me would be top priority. When it comes to college basketball in March Mania, one thing is for sure. Nothing's for sure. Upsets, buzzer beaters, Cinderella's advancing, top seeds going home early. It's all going to happen. Bet the unexpected, every upset, every day with DraftKings Sportsbook.
With live betting, exclusive content, promos, and parlays, DraftKings is the ultimate college basketball destination for March. Ready to make your first bet? Check out the matchups and pick a team to win. It's that simple. And if it's your first time, here's something special just for you. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly.
Bet the unexpected with DraftKings Sportsbook. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings, the crown is yours. There's another team out west, Logan, that's doing quite well as of late, and that's the Los Angeles Clippers, who are 8-2 in their last 10. They just finally dropped their last game in a very close one to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Are you buying this hot streak from the Clippers?
Hell no, I'm not buying no Clippers stock. Come on, Carson. You know me.
Yep.
It has been impressive. The Clippers have been impressive all year with or without Kawhi. This defense has been excellent. They're number 4 in offensive rating and defensive rating over this stretch. They're number 2 in net rating. Most importantly, I think, they're number 1 in three-point percentage. They have been absolutely spraying. Not even Norman Powell. I think Norman Powell is like sub 30% from deep over this streak. It's kind of been everybody else.
Bogey's been shooting the shit out of it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think he's up near like 55% from the field. And Harden's been playing really well. He's at 28 a night. Kawhi's at 24 a night. My man Big Zoo, I'll stand on it, Carson. I'm taking him over Bam, bruh. I'm taking Big Zoo.
You know, I love Zoo so much, but it's just such disrespect to Bam.
It's
just
not.
Such disrespect.
I really don't think it is, man. I just think Big Zoo is like that.
One of the most versatile defensive bigs in NBA history, and if you put
great
him with
rim
James
protector,
Harden, and
unstoppable in the
Clippers,
post, elite rebounder. Like, come on, man.
Don't disagree with any of that. I just think that Bam has a special defensive toolkit and is still significantly more impactful there overall. And then offensively, he's got a significant playmaking edge. His jumper has been legitimately pretty good for last month plus, and if you gave him a playmaker of the caliber of James Harden and you put offensive weaponry around him like that, he'd be more consistent, he'd be more efficient, and this wouldn't be a conversation.
I think a portion of this is situationally dependent. That being said, the thing that I always say about Big Zoo, I just think that you can't take away some of the stuff that Zoo does, man. Like, and I get that he gets some offense,
but he's not being asked to do what
Harden.
Bam is doing.
I get it. That's why I say
him to give you 20 a night.
That's why I say it is situationally dependent. Although Big Zoo is giving you 20 a night over this.
He's giving you 16 a night.
How about that? Last 10 games,
This
he's giving
fucking
you a
guy.
20-piece.
Brother, I
Carson.
just told you the other day that Bam, over like the last 20-something games, is giving you an
that
efficient-ass
20-piece.
21 for more than a month, and you said, it's not enough or something. Not a big enough
Look,
sample.
I've just got burnt by Bam in his offensive game in the past, but Big Zoo's
Oh, you mean
reliable.
when he was anchoring defenses on the way to the finals as their clear second-best player? I'm just saying put some respect on Bam.
I respect Bam.
Man.
I like Bam. I think Zoo's better. That's all I've been saying.
Zoo is really good.
Anyway,
but I'm
off that. We've
telling
been
you,
having
you're
this
not
debate
accounting
for like a month
situation
now. I'm going to
enough.
get off this. No, ultimately, I am the resident Clippers hater on this show. I don't like James Harden. I think he's going to inevitably regress at some point in the playoffs. He'll probably give you a couple of stinky games under 10 points, be really inefficient. The defense I do buy into, which is why I think the Clippers are relatively scary, and this isn't an experienced team, which is why I think that they're going to be a hard out. So that is what I buy about the Clippers. I don't think they're phony. I don't think they're fakes. I think this team is for real. I think that their defense is legit. I think that if you can get healthy Kawhi, he's still a killer. I think that Harden can turn back the clock for a little bit. He's still a genius. Like, I don't want to undersell that. Like, what ability he may have lost, he still got the brain. Like, he's a genius playmaker, a great passer, and still manufactures a lot of easy shots for his teammates. You've got good spot-up shooting around them in Bogey, in Norman Powell. You've got defenders on the wings, if it's Derrick Jones Jr., if it's Chris Dunn. Like, there's a lot to like with the Clippers. But when I look at them going on a hypothetical run in the West, I can see him winning a first-round series. I couldn't see him doing much more damage. And the reason I say that, again, it's the balancing act of James Harden. It's Kawhi Leonard's health. And that's it. And that's why I can't buy into this team. Your two biggest superstars I have major questions about ultimately when it comes to the playoffs. And that's why I am always going to be skeptical about the Clippers. But the defense isn't going anywhere. I think the shooting is legit. I think Big Zoo's the man. So
He is.
it very well may be matchup dependent on who they draw in the West. That's what I've been saying all year long in the Western Conference. I think matchups are going to determine what teams are going to do, but I just can't buy a team with Kawhi, man. Sorry.
Listen, I understand if that's the holdup. I totally get that because of what we've seen in terms of his body breaking down in the playoffs for just too many years in a row now. However, I am buying this hot streak because the Clippers, when Kawhi is healthy, are so damn good. Before the Lakers traded for Luka, I had the Clippers as my number 3 team in the West, presuming health. And now I think that the Lakers, although they've been struggling as of late, but I think some people are overreacting to that, I would now have the Clippers as my number 4 team in the West. And I think that they are much closer to the Nuggets or the Lakers than either of those teams are to OKC, by the way. That's another thing that just becomes increasingly clear to me how much better OKC is than everybody else.
I think I completely agree with that.
Like, and all year I've had them in a tier of their own, but like maybe they're 2-3 tiers above everybody else. They're just so much better. I could see the Clippers making a conference finals run if they can avoid OKC. Well, I'm just saying, I can see the Nuggets doing it. I can see the Lakers doing it. I can totally see the Clippers doing it. I think a lot of teams in the West, honestly, after OKC are just relatively close to one another. Like, I really like the Warriors. I think the Timberwolves, everybody knows how I feel about Julius Randle, but they're a good basketball team. The Grizzlies are a good basketball team. But I like the Clippers more than any of those teams because I think their top 4 is just phenomenal. I think it's one of the best in basketball.
You'd take them to wipe Houston if they drew them.
I would, absolutely. I think Houston is the 8th best team in the West. I understand they're the 2 seed, but if you get me in a playoff environment, I am betting on every half-court offense over them, and I think there's a lot of teams like LA, like Memphis, like the Warriors, like Minnesota that can also play elite defense and then just have way more offensive juice, have way more proven high-end offensive creators and shot makers. So yes, I would unequivocally pick them to win that series because the offense is clicking right now, man. That's the thing that we've been sort of waiting for with them all year because they were down Kawhi and it was Harden doing what he could to just be a floor raiser for this offense, but wasn't going to be super efficient when you're asking him to carry that sort of crazy load. And then Kawhi came back, but his jumper was off. He wasn't really in rhythm yet. Now they're playing like an elite offense because Kawhi is playing like an elite basketball player. In these last 10 games, he's giving you 25, 7, and 3 on 61% true shooting. He's back, baby. I'm not saying that he's top 8 Kawhi Leonard again, but am I saying that he's fringe top 15 Kawhi Leonard? Absolutely, because nobody can take away that elite jump shooting. Nobody can move him off his spots with his strength. He's got the elite ball handling. He always plays at his own pace. He gets to his spots, and he just kills you with brutal efficiency as a scorer. And when Kawhi plays and Norman Powell is in the lineup, the Clippers are 13-6. When their big four shares the floor together, they're a plus 10 net team. And I do love their top four, not just in terms of pure talent, but also just in terms of how many different boxes they're checking. Like, Kawhi is that assassin, hyper-efficient scorer who I feel can look an opposing team's number one scorer in the eye and outduel him and give buckets to basically anybody on the planet. And then Harden is that elite playmaker who controls the game, who still gives you elite isolation scoring and can give you some really big-time scoring performances when the pull-up three is totally on and you just can't do anything about it. But then when he's off as a pull-up shooter, we know, right, just because the guy can't finish at the rim anymore, he does have a low-scoring floor. We've seen that in the playoffs, especially against physical, athletic defenses. But he doesn't have to be your consistent number 2 scorer because I've got Norman Powell, who's a 23-point-per-game guy on 62% true shooting, just an absolute flamethrower, insane shooter of the basketball. So on some Harden off nights, I feel like Norm can counteract that because he's getting hot. And then I have Zoo, who is one of the best interior defenders in basketball, who is one of the best rebounders in basketball, who has insane touch and strength and is a walking post mismatch. Like, I've got great play finishing around James Harden. I've got so much different scoring talent in different ways. And then the totality of this team is awesome defensively. Because for my 5th guy, I'm slotting in like a psycho perimeter defender if it's Chris Dunn or if it's Derrick Jones Jr.
Well, and I was going to say, and you got Bogey to give you some juice if somebody's having 100%. An off night. I think the biggest X factor for LA in all this, though, might be Tyronn Lue and just the things that he could break out in a hypothetical playoff series defensively. Like, if there's one thing that, you know, like, there's some coaches that I think limit some of their teams, but Ty is a guy that enhances his team, and I think
totally
he's gonna bring out all the stops in a playoff series to game plan against the other one, right? He's a really good X's and O's guy.
Absolutely, and I also think the depth that this team has is underrated and has sneakily improved. Like, Bogey, I thought was such a steal at the deadline. He was having a bad year, bad shooting season, but such a good offensive player. Elite shooter, brings you some of that creation in spots and some playmaking. Last 10 games, he's giving you 13.5 points and 3.5 assists on 72% true shooting. They have that good group of defensive wings in total. Nick Batum is still a quality rotation player off the bench. Ben Simmons, Logan, when you're asking him to play 12 minutes a game, is a fine rotation piece. He can still defend, he can still rebound, he can still pass. Like, he fills his simple roles. So they're a really, really good basketball team, man. And I feel like when you see Kawhi looking like himself, there's no denying that because the defense has been elite all year. We can acknowledge that. Then if you just think about among some of these elite defensive teams, who has the offense that you trust most? If I'm comparing Memphis to the Clippers, there's no question, right? I mean, I'm taking the Clippers. First of all, I'm taking Kawhi as the number 1 scorer. I'm taking Harden's playmaking. I have too many questions about Triple J, how he's going to deal with doubles, Jaw, how is his scoring efficiency going to hold up? I trust the totality of LA's shooting. They've got, obviously, a dominant big in that matchup in Zoo. So I like their offense more. If I'm comparing them to the Timberwolves have been doing some really nice stuff when they go 5 out, but I still just worry about how things get clogged up when you have the heavy Gobert minutes, and I worry still about Julius Randle and his playmaking and shot making holding up in a playoff series. I'll take the balance and the overall talent that I get from the Clippers offense here. I'll bank on Kawhi and I'll bank on this group. I compare them to the Warriors, and there's just more high-end offensive talent here. Like, obviously, Steph is a one-man offense in a way that no Clipper is. Steph is a one-man offense in a specific way that nobody else in NBA history is, just with his gravity and his off-ball value. But I do worry just a bit about the lack of real creation alongside him. Now, Jimmy obviously brings some of it. How much is the question? Because we haven't seen him really dial up that scoring volume on ball. And I do think that he's such a great connective playmaker, as is Dre. Like, they do a really good job of capitalizing on the defensive attention that Steph draws. They do a great job of it. Shooters around him really have to make shots, though. And there's just more guys who I trust to be reliable offensive contributors in LA. So when I run down the list, outside of the teams that have like an absolute all-time force like Jokic and an offensive formula that I still really, really believe in, or a duo like Luka and LeBron, and they've shown some highs defensively. Like, against everybody else who's in this next pack, I really trust the Clippers if Kawhi is healthy, which is a huge if. But, I'm going to be an optimist about this.
It's a good take. I'm always going to circle back to it. I think it's matchup dependent. Like, the Warriors in some of these matchups scare me with like their lack of size. Like, I think that could still come back to bite them, even if 100%. It was Memphis, for example, right? Like, even though I like Golden State more, I could see Triple J and Edey just being too damn big. Like,
well, and Zoo is one of the scariest guys the Warriors could run into.
I completely agree. So if Kawhi's healthy, I could buy it. If Kawhi's healthy, I could buy it. There's not. It's the one thing. There's not a hole. There's not a glaring weakness that I think the Clippers have. Like you said, man, good on both sides of the court. They've got great depth. They've got the star power. They've got reliable veterans. Like, they check a lot of boxes.
They do.
I'm just not gonna get gut. You're not gonna give me this year.
I get it. Listen, man, and maybe I'll end up looking like a fool for getting excited about this at all, because maybe 15 minutes into game one of their series, Kawhi just loses a leg, and that would suck. I really hope it doesn't happen, but obviously there's a distinct possibility of it. I just think they've been underrated when they are healthy, because people just really don't talk about them much. They don't talk about them as being a player in these conversations. And if you watch them when they have their dudes on the floor, they are a damn good basketball team that checks a whole lot of boxes, top-end talent, having that great top four, having good depth, being a really good two-way team, having a great coach. It all hinges on Kawhi, though, and I understand if you aren't going to bet on his health. But I do think we have to acknowledge that Kawhi is playing really, really good basketball right now. Speaking of playing good basketball, Logan, there have been a couple of rookies who have been heating up, which is very appropriate because it's that time of year. It's March basketball. Weird shit happens in March basketball. Kobe White is averaging 30 points per game, and the Bulls have won 8 of their last 10. This was always the time of year, Logan. It was an annual tradition where Malik Monk would go off, and I would say, yeah, next year is going to be the breakout year for him. And by the way, Malik Monk has ended up becoming a very, very good NBA player. But as a Malik Monk truther, I would find my hope in March and April when the energy just isn't there. The intensity isn't there. Almost half the teams are in full-on tank mode. But nevertheless, Logan, the top 2 picks, Zaccharie Risacher and Alex Sarr, have both had some nice performances as of late, and we haven't talked about this rookie class a ton. So, between those top 2 picks, who has impressed you more this year?
Oh, I want to give a shout-out to another rookie that you liked a lot, too. Shout out to your boy Tyler Kolek finally getting some burn now, man. Making plays.
Dude, I know. Dude, listen, man. I legitimately think that he is going to make a case for being in their playoff rotation.
Maybe. I mean, I think he's just a rotation guy in the league, period. I think he's that stabilizing kind of force.
He's just such a pure point guard. Like, he really is. He makes such good decisions with the basketball. He's got 17 assists to 0 turnovers in the last 2 games, and relatively shifty, plays at a really nice pace, like, good shooter of the basketball. I just trust him to be, like, kind of a bench floor general for 8 minutes. The Knicks might only play 6 dudes in the playoffs. I mean, actually, I think that they should only play 7. I think that they should just play their starters, and they should play Mitch, and they should play Deuce. But if it were to come down to Campaign versus Tyler Kolek, that'd be a conversation I'd have. I don't think it's going to happen, but yes, shout out to him.
He's been balling. For me, this is easily Risacher for a few reasons. Most importantly, my expectations were just way lower for Risacher coming into this year, and if I'm being honest, I've kind of been disappointed by Alex Sarr for a lot of this season, just in terms of his development. I think there are some encouraging things that I'll get into, but I think Risacher is going to have a place in this league for a decade plus. Like, they traded away Bogey. To me, that's kind of Risacher's comp, like, right now. Like, he's a really good shooter. And he's just got really good off-ball feel, positioning, and instincts.
100%.
He knows how to get to open space. He's so conscious of spacing. Like, he knows that that's my secret weapon. That's my special trait. I need to always weaponize that. He's really good at that. He's a 37% catch and shooter this year. On the year, he's giving you 12, 4, and 1 on 45, 35, 72 splits, 55% true shooting. But if you're just looking post All-Star break, he has been super efficient. 14 points, 5 rebounds, 1 assist on 49% from the field, 41% from deep, and 61% true shooting. I just think Risaché's got a game that's really portable, that fits with a lot of different teams, and he's just an easy plug-and-play guy. And I was skeptical. I didn't like his at-rim finishing. I didn't like his rim pressure. I didn't like his ball handle. But that's just not his game. Yeah. I think this guy is a spot-up problem. Actually, I won't say that. He's a spot-up shooter. I think he can become a better spot-up problem in terms of closeout attacking and stuff like that. Those are the areas of his game that need improvement and refinement. But right now, he's got such a solid offensive foundation right now. Again, with just feel, instincts, positioning, and shooting, he's going to have a pronounced impact offensively. I've liked Sarr too. I've just been so disgusted at times with his offensive game. It's a good word for it. The Wizards are not a good offense at all, but they're actually 4.6 points worse offensively with Sarr on the floor. He's all finesse right now. He has very little offensive polish, and this is what we said in the pre-draft process, right? It is going to be a project
100%.
With Sarr. He's attempting 5 threes per game. I like that, honestly, from Sarr, even though he's not a good shooter. I think it's encouraging long-term that he is okay with shooting them at high volume, and I think if teams are going to concede that look to him, just take it. It's the third most three-pointers attempted by a 7-footer ever, a 7-foot rookie, just behind Markkanen and Wemby. His touch is not nearly as good as even those guys. He's a 31% catch and shooter. The efficiency's really bad, 39% from the field, 32% from deep, 48% true shooting. And it really is just that strength and physicality for me where he gets matched up. The one that stuck out to me recently was that Knicks game where he's matched up against Mitchell Robinson for some of the game, and it's like he can't get anything. He's got this spin move that he likes to get to, and he's got these little baby hooks with both hands. Like, there's something there. I don't know what it is yet. I don't know if it's going to translate to efficient offense. There's something. Like, he's working on his touch. He's working on that finesse. I just don't know if it's ever going to materialize into, like, a really reliable offensive skill set. The one thing that I have been impressed with is defensively. Like, there is something there with Sarr. 1.5 blocks per game. They're 2 points better defensively. It's not a drastic difference, but it's... To me, Risacher is just more bankable for having a long career and a winning skill set that just fits alongside other guys. I definitely think Sarr has a higher ceiling, but I also think his floor is way, way lower. His offensive game is so raw right now. And that's why I would go with Risacher, just because I expected when we had gotten to this point in March or April, Sarr's offensive game would be a little better than it is right now, and I'm still a little disappointed with those aspects. But honestly, they're about where I expected them to be at this point in their rookie years with what I thought about them as prospects. With that being said, I'm more impressed with Risacher. He's a little bit further along in his development right now, and I think he's a rotation guy. I think he's a starter. I think he's going to have a place in this league for a very long time.
I would say that these guys look similar to what I expected, but I think that Risacher has been a better version of himself than I predicted, whereas Sarr has been probably a slightly rougher version of himself. And I was higher on Sarr in the draft process. I felt strongly that he was the number 1 prospect in this class and that Atlanta should have taken him number 1 overall. But Risacher has had the better rookie season, and my favorite thing about him, unequivocally, is his activity and his feel off ball offensively. He's already one of the best cutting wings in basketball, period, point blank, which is a very rare ability for a rookie to already have that understanding of how you can impact the game so efficiently without imposing yourself on the game and stepping on any toes whatsoever. I love that. That's like one of the most scalable traits you can have. He also runs the floor hard in transition. He's like 94th percentile transition frequency, and he's a good athlete there. So those are things that I liked about him as a prospect. Those were things that I considered pluses for him. They've just been even more impressive than I anticipated. He has been better as a finisher than I expected, because that was a major red flag with him as a prospect. Like, I think he shot below 50% at the rim, and you just saw the lack of springiness, but really the lack of physicality and at times decisiveness around the rim.
I feel like he plays bigger than he is, though, now. I feel that way at times. Like, I feel like Risacher can't impose himself on mismatches.
I don't really agree. I still would like to see him be more consistently physical. Like, I think that is an area where he can struggle as a finisher. He still hasn't been good as a finisher. Like, he's almost 60% in the restricted area. That's not a good number, but it is better than I expected.
Yeah.
Like, it hasn't been the sort of big red flag that I thought it was as a prospect. And he does have solid passing feel. You don't really see it with the assist numbers, but you just see it in spots as like a connective playmaker. That's something you saw with him as a prospect as well. But I do think a lot of his success in this league is just going to hinge on his shot. Just how good of a shooter is he, really, which was a question about him as a prospect because there wasn't a large sample size of him being a very good shooter. And it's very much been a tale of two seasons for him as a shooter this year. But the reason that shooting is so important to his value is because, like you said, I don't see the creation with him. He's a 12th percentile pick and roll creator, doesn't have the handle, doesn't have the burst, doesn't have the wiggle to really get by people, which is what we expected, right? That was never the role that he was going to be cast in, as that sort of lead or really even secondary creator for a team. It's about his play finishing, his cutting, and his shooting. And that's where he has been so much better in the second half of this season. Like, if you just split the year into his first 32 games, he was under 11 points per game on 28% from three, 48% true shooting. His last 32 games, he's almost 14 points per game on 40% from three, 60% true shooting. Realistically, for the second half of the season, he's been the best rookie in basketball, but it was very rough for him offensively in the first half of the season. And he has improved as a finisher as the year has gone along, in my opinion. I just think he's gotten more comfortable offensively overall. But the big difference is just that jump in three-point percentage. And overall on the year, he's 35% from three. He's 72% from the line. So he lands somewhere in the middle, which to me says he's a solid jump shooter. And when he's a solid jump shooter, then I think you have a nice role-playing wing, pretty good defensive tools, really good off-ball instincts. If he's a high-end shooter, then he's a really awesome complementary wing. Like, if he's a guy who can shoot 40% from deep, then I just want him on my team every day of the week. And that's the biggest key for him. But the last couple months have been really impressive on that front. When it comes to Sarr, I agree with what you said about the lower floor and the higher ceiling, because offensively, he's got a lot to figure out. I mean, much more to figure out than Risacher, who I think is in a simpler role, but is also just trying to do simpler stuff, more efficient, and is better at certain traits right now than Sarr is.
Do you think his job is easier? Because I also thought about this too. I was like, he does have a lead playmaker that's one of the best in the league. Like, Trae Young can manufacture shots for him. I think the Hawks like to play up tempo. It's like, I mean, a lot of Sarr is him just missing open pick and pop threes, but like,
yeah, but I do think that that's a very good point. I mean, I think if you paired Sarr specifically just with a pick and roll genius like Trae Young,
that's why I liked
no
Atlanta
question he would
for
look
him
better.
so much.
I completely agree. He could be that pick and roll complement to Trae, and he could be that defensive anchor.
But I also I think the Hawks like their front court and where they were at with Onyeka and Jalen Johnson too. So Sarr also didn't want to go to Atlanta, but yeah, I think that may have played a factor.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Atlanta also seems to still like Clint Capella after all these years, so that's pretty fun. But Sarr, you mentioned how brutally inefficient he's been, and he is so reliant on his perimeter game. He's one of those bigs who slips a majority of his screens, pops a majority of the time, so he's very reliant on the three ball. As a roller, he's not a good finisher. He needs to add a lot of strength. That's been an issue for him since he was a prospect, right? Non-dunk finishes just being very inefficient there. What I do really like from him as a roller, though, is his short roll passing. I think that he's actually got really nice feel and vision, and that's super valuable, being that connective piece who can make decisions.
I think sometimes he could be more like unselfish. I think he could be an even better playmaker sometimes, where like if he, would hit a dude in the dunker spot or hit an open shooter, there's a lot of times where he's collapsing the defense and he goes up, and I don't know. I think he could tap into that even more.
I totally agree. What I'm saying is it's rare to see much short roll playmaking at all from a rookie, from a 7-foot rookie, and we're already seeing that. So I think that that's an area that he's going to consistently bring value, but it's just his preference to play a lot from the perimeter, and it does always make me nervous when a big wants to play from the perimeter this much because you have to be really good at it to make it work. Like if you're going to be in love with your jumper as a big man, well, you better be a good jump shooter, and there's not a ton of those guys at 7 feet tall. The floor is just very low when you're not getting as much of the easy big man stuff, when you're not cleaning up a bunch of offensive rebounds and getting a bunch of little dump offs in the dunker spot and finishing easily off the roll. And Sarr does not get much of that stuff. I do think he has impressive fluidity and skill for his size. He's got some nice moves, spins, euros in the lane. But if you just give him the ball and ask him to create a shot for himself on an island, if that's an ISO or a post-up, like I can basically guarantee he's taking a tough-ass shot. Like maybe he gives you a spin move into a contested runner. There's going to be a lot of tough fadeaways and just a lot of inefficient, tough jumpers. He's averaging 0.57 points per ISO and post-up combined this year. That's absolutely terrible, and turns it over a decent bit in those spots. He can get in some trouble handling in traffic. He can shuffle his feet off the catch sometimes, although I think that he does have pretty solid footwork for a 7-footer as young as he is. I do think he's going to be a good shooter as a popper and as a spot-up guy, though. Like, I understand the numbers aren't super pretty right now. He's just over 32% from deep on the year, and he's 64% from the line. But like Risacher, he's also been trending upwards. He had a terrible three-point shooting start to the year, but since December 1st, that's a majority of the season, he's almost 36% from three. And I really like his shot. It's a very fluid stroke. So the fact that he's already making it such a priority at this age, and I think that he's actually clearly been better as a jump shooter than he was even last year as a prospect. Like, I do think that he's going to end up being good there, and the passing feel was a big plus. So I do worry about some of the finishing inside. I worry about that a lot, and I do think that he absolutely has to add more strength, which is always kind of a given with guys with his frame at his age. He's 7'2", 205, but you expect him to add 30 pounds throughout his career in the league. I still think I would take him over Risacher. Like, I still really do like his ceiling. If the shot pans out, then I feel like I'm getting enough offensive value from him with the pick and pop game and the floor spacing and some of the passing feel that we've seen. Because I think defensively, like, he's going to be awesome, dude. That was always by far his major selling point as a prospect, right? It was like, it's going to be a project offensively. We'll see what level he gets to offensively. But if he's just an okay offensive player, then he's going to be a really good basketball player overall, because I think he has an all-defense kind of ceiling. Like, just very rare mobility for a 7-foot guy with a 7'4" wingspan. He can guard in space, and he blocks 2 shots per 75 possessions. He's a good rim protector. So that's where he's getting most of his value. And if you can be a great defensive big, man, we talk about it all the time. That's just such a valuable thing to be, anchoring a defense. And he's just got to be a solid offensive player, and I think he can get there. So he does have the higher ceiling. He has more questions for sure because of his offense. I would still take him over Risacher, but Risacher has definitely shrunk the gap from where I felt it was on draft day, where I was like, clearly Sarr is the better guy.
I mean, I think my favorite prospect might still be Kel'el Ware. I mean, with what
out of the
we've
whole
seen,
draft,
maybe Kel'el Ware might be my guy.
he's really fucking good, man. He's really good.
He is. He really is. Or
I
Buzelis.
honestly,
Buzelis is up there for me too.
for me, it's probably Donovan Clingan, which I get it is not like
Damn,
a
I forgot
sexy,
about
flashy pick, but
I forgot about Klingon too. One of those three guys.
Clingan, I said at the time, had the highest floor in this draft, and this was a draft where, for the most part, I was prioritizing floor. I felt like Sarr was an exception because if you could take him number one to pair with Trey, I thought he was the best talent in the draft with the most upside. But Clingan, just day one, was going to bring you elite rebounding on both sides of the floor, which he has done. Elite rim protection, which he has done. He's been one of the best in basketball as an interior defender already. And he's just so massive, bro. I mean, he's 7'2", 280 with, what, a 7'7" wingspan and an efficient finisher. He's got solid touch. He's got solid passing feel. I thought he was a very good post scorer at UConn. They just haven't tapped into that at all with the Blazers. Like, I just know that he's going to be all defense. He's one of those dudes defensively, and I do think will be a very solid offensive player. So he's got the highest floor. I think per minute he's been the best rookie this season. It's just the Blazers' center rotation is so stacked. But I do really like the Buzelis shout. I mean, we both really liked him as a prospect. I think he's got a very, very intriguing two-way skill set and athletically very impressive. And I do love Khalil Ware. He's really good.
Yeah, those are
And
my
of course,
guys.
Jared McCain was balling out before he got hurt.
He was. But I think Sarr's going to figure it out too. I like that he doesn't hesitate when he shoots a jumper. He doesn't overthink it. He catches, he puts it up, he's confident in it. And also, in a spot like Washington, like there's no pressure to play winning basketball or to be super efficient or to be great immediately. This is a young, growing team that fits his timeline. And I wish he'd take his time a little bit more sometimes on the low block. And I get it's hard for him being a finesse big. He doesn't like banging down low like that, but I think he can speed himself up a little too much on some of these spin shots and some of these hooks. I think he's going to develop good touch. I think it may take 3+ years maybe. I'm looking like down the road like 2 to 4 years. But I think Sarr is going to figure it out. I like his makeup.
The flashes are super impressive.
They are. They really are. It's just really rough right now. So, yeah, I do like other rookies more than these two guys, but I think they're both going to be solid in this league, and I still do think Sarr has the higher ceiling, which is why I still would take him over Risacher in a redraft.
I'll give you the two most concerning numbers for Alex Sarr offensively. 64% in the restricted area for a big man. That's quite a low number. But the more concerning one, under 29% in the paint outside the restricted area. So it inside of like 8 feet overall.
It feels like that, too.
He shoots just under 50%. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, he's just got to get better with that sort of intermediate
and I mean, he
really
touch.
He has no post game, really.
The physicality part is so concerning just because, like, it won't even be like, you know, I used the Mitchell Robinson comp earlier. That's a really physical, strong big man. It's sometimes it's against wings and it's against smaller guys where I'm like, dude, you're massive, bro. Just go over him. Just go through the guy.
And that's why I'm betting on Donovan Clingan, baby, who per 36 has given me 12 points, 14.5 boards, over 3 blocks, just had 18 and 12 against the Cavs. And I should mention, Clingan's been showing a little bit of a 3-ball, just a little bit, but he was 2 of 3 from deep last night. So I'm just extremely confident in him being very good. But shout out to this draft class, man.
Could not believe he slipped that far. I know a lot of people hated on it. I've been impressed. I've been encouraged by a lot of these guys in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously one of the weakest ever in terms of top-end talent, but the goal in this draft was always basically to find guys who could play a role, who could have an impact. It's not about finding stars, and I do think some guys are on a good, positive trajectory there. I do have to shout out probably the steal of the draft, Kyle Filipowski at number 32. Like, I thought he was a top 20 talent. He's had a really good season. I'm not talking anymore about guys who like are in the conversation for best player in this class.
Well, I just thought
he's
about
just so good. I know he just fell because he's Mormon and he was being gaslit by his girlfriend or whatever, but like that guy can hoop, man.
He can. I couldn't believe he fell that far. I think the Warriors got a steal with Quentin Post in the second round.
True.
Yeah, I overhated. I think there's a lot of good role players in this class.
Shout out to the 2024 NBA draft class. And even for the guys who are struggling, you know, like Reed Shepherd, I really liked. He was one of my top 3 prospects, ended up going number 3 overall. Hasn't played much at all, hasn't played well when he has been on the floor outside of the one game he had against OKC where he had 25 and actually played big minutes. What I always say is give yourself time with young, small guards because it tends to be rough from the start. The efficiency tends to be bad. And he's also in a very unique spot where, like, this is a team that's the 2 seed, so he does not have remotely the same opportunities to just, like, go out there and figure shit out for 20 minutes a game that a bunch of other guys do, like Stephon Castle, for example, or the guys we've been talking about, Risacher and Alex Sarr, where they get to go out there and try stuff. That's not a privilege that's been afforded to Reed Shepherd. So I'm very interested to see what he looks like going forward, and I'm interested to see what happens with this entire draft class, and I'm interested to see what Nikola Topic looks like when he takes the floor, Logan, because he was one of my favorite guys pre-draft, and I'm interested to see what Deron Holmes looks like when he takes the floor, because I thought he was an excellent pick to address the Nuggets' disaster at backup center, and then he tore his ACL, so still a lot to be learned in year 2. Also, shout out to my beloved Tristan da Silva, who has been a solid contributor for a solid basketball team this entire year. I'm just kind of thinking about this entire rookie class now because you got to give some love to the young guys, Logan. You know that, and don't take that out of context. And on that note, we're done. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, the good news is there's plenty more Nerd Sesh content. You can find all of our full episodes on the NBA and the NFL across all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts in terms of audio, and also on YouTube, where you can also find our video essays and video breakdowns that we do going more in depth on a single specific topic. We just ranked our top 30 players in the NBA in a 3-part series that you can find. We also just had the GOAT Kenny Beecham on the pod last Friday, did some trivia with him, talked some ball with him. You can check that out. And if you want even more of our content, check us out on social media, TikTok, Instagram, at NerdSesh, Twitter, at Nerd_Sesh. We got clips from the show. We got graphics from the show, including our full top 30 players ranked, laid out there for you in visual form. And we've got all of our trivia content. So go ahead and check that out if you want. You can also join our Discord if you want. That is linked at the link tree that is across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch if you want. That is also at our link tree and at breakingtea.com. So with that, as always, I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.